I want to start with a simple but profound truth: you are enough. Not when you lose 10 pounds, not when you get that promotion, not when you finally have everything figured out. Right now, as you are. But here's the challenge: believing it. We live in a world that tells us to hustle for our worthiness, to perfect every flaw, to prove that we deserve love and belonging. But what if I told you that the very thing you're trying to erase your imperfection is actually your greatest gift? We live in a world that constantly tells us we need to be more successful, more attractive, more accomplished, more everything. From the moment we wake up, we are bombarded with messages that whisper, "You're not enough." We scroll through curated lives on social media, compare our behind-the-scenes realities, highlight reel, and start believing that if we could just fix this one thing about ourselves, then we'd finally be worthy. But the truth is, perfection is an illusion, and chasing it is the quickest way to lose ourselves. Authenticity isn't about being flawless, it's about being real. It's about standing in front of the mirror, looking at every part of yourself, the messy, the complicated, the parts you wish were different, and saying, "This is me." It's about knowing that you are worthy, not because you've checked off some impossible list of expectations, but simply because you exist. Yet, embracing imperfection is terrifying. We're taught from a young age to hide our flaws, to be good, to be liked, to be acceptable. We're praised when we achieve and subtly shamed when we fall short. And over time, we learn to trade authenticity for approval. We put on masks. We shrink ourselves into versions of who we think we're supposed to be. We smooth out the rough edges of our personality, silence the parts of us that feel too loud, too much, too different. We start believing that if people really saw us unfiltered, unpolished, undone, they wouldn't love us. But what if the very thing we've been hiding is the thing that could connect us to others the most? Imperfection is what makes us human. It's the reason we relate to stories of struggle, not stories of perfection. It's why we find comfort in a friend who says, "Me too," instead of someone who pretends to have it all together. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are, we invite deeper connections, real relationships, and genuine love. Think about the people you admire, the ones who inspire you. Chances are they were not the ones who seem perfect, but the ones who are unapologetically themselves. The ones who own their quirks, their struggles, their imperfections. Because when someone is real, they give us permission to be real too. But embracing imperfection doesn't just mean accepting our flaws, it means reframing how we see them. It means realizing that the parts of us we've been taught to hide might actually be the most beautiful, most powerful parts of who we are. The awkwardness, the scars, the failures, the things that didn't go as planned, those are the chapters of our story that make it interesting, that make it worth telling. And yet we resist. We resist because perfection feels safe. We believe that if we could just be perfect, then we'd never feel rejected, never feel unworthy, never feel like we don't belong. But perfectionism is a liar. It tells us that we can earn love and belonging by being flawless. But in reality, it only isolates us. It keeps us trapped in fear of failing, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. So what if, instead of striving for perfection, we strive for authenticity? What if we stopped trying to be impressive and started trying to be real? What if we let go of the impossible standards we've set for ourselves and embraced who we are as we are in this moment? Authenticity isn't about waiting until we have everything figured out. It's about showing up as we are, even when we feel messy, even when we feel uncertain. It's about recognizing that our imperfections don't make us less, they make us whole. There's a version of ourselves that we present to the world, the polished, put together, carefully curated version that seems strong, capable, and in control. And then there's the version of ourselves that we sometimes hide, the one that doubts, struggles, feels insecure, and wonders if we're truly enough. The gap between these two versions is often filled with fear. Fear of not measuring up. Fear of being seen too clearly. Fear that if we show the world who we really are, we won't be accepted. But here's the truth: wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about embracing all parts of ourselves, our strengths, our struggles, our joys, and our pain. And the only way to do that is through courage, compassion, and connection. These three things are not just ideals, they are the foundation of a life that is rich, meaningful, and authentic. When we think of courage, we often picture grand acts of bravery, running into burning buildings, standing up to injustice, or taking bold risks. But courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing to show up as we are, even when we're terrified. It's saying, this is me without the guarantee of approval. Speaking our truth even when our voice shakes. Real courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to step forward despite it. It's easy to hide behind masks, to play it safe, to avoid situations where we might be judged. But when we do that, we also miss out on the deep, genuine experiences that come from being truly seen. Courage is the key that unlocks authenticity. And the beautiful thing about it, it's contagious. When we see someone else being brave enough to be real, it gives us permission to do the same. If courage is the first step, compassion is what helps us keep going. Because the truth is, showing up as our real selves is messy. We make mistakes, we fall short, we say the wrong thing. We look back on past choices and cringe. And in those moments, we have two options. We can either tear ourselves down with self-judgment, or we can meet ourselves with kindness. Compassion isn't about making excuses or pretending that everything is fine. It's about acknowledging our imperfections and choosing to love ourselves anyway. It's the voice that says, you're doing the best you can. It's the gentle reminder that we are worthy even when we don't feel like it. And here's the thing, when we practice compassion with ourselves, it naturally extends to others. We stop holding people to impossible standards. We recognize that just like us, they are doing their best. We become less critical, more understanding, more open. Instead of building walls of judgment, we create bridges of empathy. At our core, we are wired for connection. We long to be seen, heard, and understood. But true connection can only happen when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. When we hide our struggles, when we pretend we have it all together, we build barriers between ourselves and the people who love us. Connection isn't about impressing others, it's about being real with them. It's about sharing not just our successes, but also our fears, our doubts, our challenges. It's about allowing ourselves to be supported, even when we're used to carrying everything alone. And yet, connection requires risk. It requires trust. It requires the courage to say, I need help, or I don't have all the answers. It requires compassion, both for ourselves and for those around us. But when we choose connection over isolation, we discover something powerful. We are never alone. When we embrace courage, we stop shrinking ourselves to fit into spaces that don't honor who we are. When we practice compassion, we stop punishing ourselves for being human. And when we choose connection, we open ourselves to the kind of love and belonging that no amount of perfection could ever give us. We live in a culture that teaches us to armor up, to be strong, to be invulnerable. From an early age, we learn that showing too much emotion, admitting uncertainty, or exposing our struggles can be seen as weakness. We are taught that strength means keeping it together, never letting them see you sweat, and always having the right answer. So we build walls around our hearts. We filter our words. We hold back. We convince ourselves that if we can just stay in control, if we can just be perfect, then we'll never have to feel exposed. But here's the paradox. The very thing we are trying to avoid, vulnerability, is the thing that makes love, connection, and courage possible. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is not oversharing. It is not handing our deepest wounds to people who haven't earned our trust. Vulnerability is showing up fully and authentically without the guarantee of acceptance. It's standing in front of another person, whether in a relationship, a friendship, or a workplace, and saying, this is me, the real me. And I'm willing to be seen. It is in those moments of raw openness that we find what we are truly searching for, belonging. Not the kind of belonging that comes from fitting in or performing, but the deep, soul-affirming belonging that comes from being loved exactly as we are. But vulnerability is terrifying. It feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, hoping that if we jump, someone will be there to catch us. It feels risky because it is. There is no vulnerability without risk, no openness without the possibility of rejection. And because of that, many of us choose to stay guarded. We avoid difficult conversations. We hold back our true thoughts. We laugh off pain instead of acknowledging it. We pretend we don't care when deep down we do. We trade authenticity for protection. But in doing so, we also trade connection for loneliness. Think about the relationships in your life that mean the most to you. The ones where you feel safe, understood, and truly seen. Chances are, those relationships weren't built on small talk or perfection. They were built on moments of realness, when someone admitted they were struggling, when you opened up about your fears, when both of you took off your masks and let each other in. That's the power of vulnerability. It creates intimacy. It deepens trust. It allows us to say, I don't have it all together, and still be loved anyway. But it's not just personal relationships. Vulnerability is also what drives creativity, leadership, and innovation. Every great artist, writer, or entrepreneur who has ever created something meaningful has had to be vulnerable. They've had to put their work into the world with no promise that it would be accepted. They've had to take risks, open themselves to criticism, and be willing to fail. Without vulnerability, there is no growth. There is no progress. And yet we resist it. We resist it because vulnerability means being seen. And being seen means there is a chance we could be judged. So we numb, we distract ourselves, we keep busy, we avoid hard conversations. We choose perfectionism over authenticity. But here's what we don't realize. When we numb the pain, we also numb the joy. When we build walls to protect ourselves from rejection, we also keep out love. When we refuse to be vulnerable, we deny ourselves the very thing that makes life meaningful, deep, true, wholehearted connection. To embrace vulnerability is to embrace life in its fullest form. It is to say, I am willing to be seen, even when it scares me. I am willing to show up, even when there are no guarantees. I am willing to be real, even when it's uncomfortable. And in that space of uncertainty, in that moment of openness, is where the magic happens. Perfectionism is one of the greatest barriers to living a wholehearted life. It disguises itself as ambition, as high standards, as a commitment to excellence. It whispers, if you just try a little harder, if you just do everything right, then you'll finally be enough. It convinces us that perfection is the price we must pay for acceptance, success, and love. But the truth is, perfectionism isn't about striving for excellence, it's about trying to avoid shame. At its core, perfectionism is rooted in fear. The fear of being judged, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of being seen as anything less than flawless. We believe that if we can control everything, our appearance, our work, our relationships, then we can control how others see us. We think that if we are perfect, we will finally be safe from criticism, failure, or disappointment. But the reality is, perfectionism doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of never feeling good enough, no matter how much we accomplish. Perfectionism doesn't say, be the best version of yourself. It says, be perfect or don't even try. It tells us that mistakes are unacceptable, that vulnerability is weakness, that failure is something to be ashamed of rather than a stepping stone to growth. And because perfectionism sets impossible standards, it keeps us in a constant state of stress and self-doubt. We procrastinate because we fear that what we create won't be good enough. We overwork ourselves, believing that our worth is tied to our achievements. We avoid taking risks, afraid that any imperfection will be proof that we don't belong. The irony is that perfectionism doesn't just keep us from failure, it also keeps us from joy. When we are so focused on avoiding mistakes, we miss out on the beauty of the process. We stop taking creative chances. We stop allowing ourselves to explore, play, and experiment. We become so consumed with getting everything right that we forget to actually live. Think about the people you love most, the ones who make you feel at home, who bring you the most joy, who inspire you. Chances are you don't love them because they are perfect, you love them because they are real, because they have quirks and flaws and human moments that make them who they are. And yet we hold ourselves to a different standard. We think that in order to be loved, we must be flawless. But the truth is, perfection is not what connects us to others. Authenticity is. Letting go of perfectionism doesn't mean lowering our standards or not caring about our work. It means shifting our focus from what will people think to, is this meaningful to me? It means valuing progress over perfection, effort over outcome, courage over control. It means recognizing that our worth is not determined by how flawlessly we perform, but by the simple fact that we are human. It also means embracing self-compassion. Perfectionism thrives on self-criticism, on the relentless voice in our heads that tells us we are never enough. But self-compassion allows us to acknowledge our struggles without letting them define us. It reminds us that mistakes are part of the process, that growth comes from imperfection, that failure is not proof of our inadequacy, but proof that we are trying, learning, evolving. When we let go of perfectionism, we free ourselves. We free ourselves from the fear of not being enough. We free ourselves from the exhausting need to prove our worth. We allow ourselves to be seen not as perfect, but as real, as brave, as worthy just as we are. Fear and shame are two of the most powerful emotions that shape our lives. They tell us to stay small, to play it safe, to never risk too much. They convince us that we are not enough, that we are undeserving, that if we dare to step into joy, it will be taken from us. And so we hold back. We sabotage our happiness before anything else can. We tell ourselves not to get too comfortable, not to celebrate too soon, not to trust the good moments, because deep down we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is what fear does. It keeps us from fully experiencing life. It makes us believe that joy is dangerous, that happiness is fleeting, that if we let ourselves feel too much love, too much excitement, too much hope, we will only be setting ourselves up for disappointment. Shame whispers, "Who do you think you are to be happy?" It tells us that we haven't done enough, that we aren't good enough, that we don't deserve the kind of life we long for. But the truth is, fear and shame do not protect us. They not make us safer. They only rob us of the very things that make life meaningful. When we let fear dictate our choices, we shrink. When we let shame define us, we disconnect. We stop showing up as ourselves, and in doing so, we miss out on the love, the beauty, the richness of being fully alive. Gratitude and joy are the antidotes. They are not just emotions, they are choices. They are ways of living, ways of seeing the world. Choosing gratitude does not mean ignoring pain, and choosing joy does not mean pretending that everything is perfect. It means deciding every single day to recognize what is good, even in the midst of struggle. It means choosing to focus on what we have rather than what we lack. It means allowing ourselves to feel happiness without guilt, to embrace the moments of light even when we know that darkness exists. Gratitude is an active practice. It is not something that just happens, it is something we cultivate. It is waking up and saying, "I have breath in my lungs. I have people who love me. I have this moment right now." And that is enough. It is recognizing that joy is not found in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary, the laughter at the dinner table, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the way a song can transport us to a memory we thought we had forgotten. And yet, joy is one of the most vulnerable emotions we can feel. It requires us to let go of control. It requires us to be present, to be open, to trust that we are worthy of it. That is why so many of us struggle with it. We wait for the worst to happen. We downplay our happiness. We tell ourselves not to get too attached to good things because we don't want to be disappointed. But living in a constant state of fear does not prevent pain, it only prevents us from fully experiencing life. Shame tries to keep us from joy by telling us that we are not enough, that we have to be more, do more, prove more before we can truly be happy. But gratitude silences shame. It reminds us that we do not have to be perfect to be worthy, that happiness is not a prize, we earn it, is a birthright we can claim. When we choose gratitude, we shift our perspective. We stop seeing life through the lens of scarcity and start seeing it through the lens of abundance. We stop waiting for the perfect moment to be happy and realize that happiness is found in the imperfect, in the messy, in the beautifully ordinary moments that make up our days. Joy is not something we have to earn. It is something we have to allow. And gratitude is the path that leads us there. Life moves fast. It's easy to wake up every day, go through the motions, check off to-do lists, meet expectations, and still feel like something is missing. We keep ourselves busy chasing accomplishments, approval, and the next big thing, believing that once we reach a certain milestone, once we get the promotion, the degree, the relationship, the perfect body, then we'll finally feel fulfilled. But fulfillment isn't something we stumble upon. It's something we cultivate. And the only way to truly experience it is by living with intention and purpose. Living with intention means making conscious choices instead of simply reacting to life. It means waking up every day and deciding who we want to be, rather than letting the world decide for us. It's about aligning our actions with our values, making space for what truly matters, and not letting distractions, expectations, or fear dictate the course of our lives. But before we can live with intention, we have to know what we stand for. We have to get clear about our values, not the ones we think we should have, but the ones that genuinely reflect who we are. Too often we adopt the values handed to us by family, society, or culture without ever questioning whether they align with what truly matters to us. We spend years chasing someone else's definition of success, only to realize that it doesn't bring us the sense of fulfillment we were promised. Purpose is not about achieving one big, singular goal. It's about living in a way that is meaningful to us. It's about being able to look back on our days and say, I spent my time in a way that mattered. That doesn't mean every moment has to be productive, grand, or life-changing. It simply means that our actions reflect what we care about. It means we are intentional with our energy, our focus, and our choices. One of the biggest obstacles to living with intention is the feeling that we don't have control. We tell ourselves that we don't have time to slow down, that we have too many responsibilities, that life is just too demanding. And while it's true that we can't control everything, we can control how we show up. We can control the way we respond, the way we prioritize, the way we choose to engage with the world. Living with purpose doesn't mean we have to quit our jobs, move to a new city, or make dramatic changes overnight. Sometimes purpose is found in the small, everyday moments, the way we show up for the people we love, the way we listen, the way we make others feel seen and valued. It's found in the courage to pursue what lights us up, even when it doesn't make sense to others. It's found in the willingness to create, to learn, to grow, to contribute in a way that feels meaningful. But intention requires us to stop and reflect. It requires us to ask, am I living in alignment with what truly matters to me? It asks us to stop sleepwalking through life and start making choices that reflect who we are, not just who we think we're supposed to be. Too often we wait for clarity before we take action. We think we need to have everything figured out before we can start living with purpose. But clarity doesn't come from waiting, it comes from movement. It comes from doing, from experimenting, from paying attention to what excites us, what drains us, what makes us feel alive. It comes from making small, intentional choices every day that lead us toward a life that feels meaningful. When we live with intention and purpose, we stop measuring our worth by external achievements and start defining success on our own terms. We stop living on autopilot and start fully engaging with the present. We make space for what truly matters, for the things that bring us joy, for the relationships that nourish us, for the work that fulfills us. We stop waiting for life to feel meaningful and start choosing to create meaning in every moment.